Welcome to Occupations, the podcast, where we discuss what it's like to hold specific jobs. Occupations is brought to you by lotsofmaps.com, where you fulfill your vintage map gifting needs. Visit lotsofmaps.com.
Hello and welcome to Occupations, the podcast. Andy Jaggelinzer here for our 2-year anniversary, 24th episode, once a month. Today is the 2-year episode, and we have a really special guest, my friend Ant Toombs. He's talking to us from Los Angeles, where he lives, and we're on the phone with him, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his job. He is the founding member, growth and expanding strategist of the Playmaker Project, which is part of the Life is Good brand, which those in New England certainly know Life is Good. They do a lot of charitable stuff and a lot of things that are doing good in the world. And Ant is one of the stars of that project. Welcome, Ant.
Yes. Thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me, bro.
And absolutely. It's our pleasure. Ant, tell me what your job is. Let's just go right at that. What do you do in your job?
Got it. So first, thanks for the introduction, man. And I am a founding member. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not the founder of the Playmaker Project as it is known today. And man, I'm a playmaker, Andy. True at heart for what Playmaker really is. Like some folks know and understand Playmaker. You might watch sports, for example. And, playmakers show up and they make good things happen at a critical moment in the game. And I'm up to that same thing, man. I'm a playmaker, making good things happen, but in the lives of children. When I say children, I'm talking about children of all ages, man. Mm-hmm. And that really includes us as well. It's like the childlike mind, the childlike approach.
I'm the most immature person you met, so I fit in perfectly with that demographic. Tell me what your day-to-day is like. And I'm sure no 2 days are the same, but where do you start? Who calls you in? Or do you just go out and just find it? What's happening there to make this happen?
Well, my whole approach to making sure that children are afforded the opportunity to engage in what they know the best in life, and that's play, right? The first thing is we partner with those that have gold, man. And the gold is the relationship with the children.
Right.
Because we can't go around and play with all the children in the world. So we've sticking a flag in the sand. And I say we because I'm a part of a whole team, man. I just happen to be the one that's responsible here now for growth and expansion because I'm adamant about this idea of playfulness being available for all children in the world, man. That's how they're going to be able to engage, connect, and explore with the surrounding world so that they can change this place for all the good that they have inside, man. And sometimes it gets clouded up. Seeing that you can't go around and play with all the kids in the world, man, it makes sense to partner with the people that have the relationship. And that's what I'm talking about when I mean the gold, man. It's like frontline childhood professionals are seeing children each and every day. Mm-hmm. And those providers, man, as we know this, the Department of Education is underfunded. Right. And they're still showing up with everything that they have. And sometimes, all of that goodness gets covered up as they become older children. Right. They're showing up to create those environments where our children are supposed to engage, connect, and explore. But, long and short is you can't spread what you don't have, man. It makes sense. Partner with those frontline childhood professionals and help them rediscover all of the goodness that they understand about the power of playfulness and make sure that they're showing up with the same ingredients, the same power traits, superpower traits, even if you will, of love and peace and joy and all of those things that help children to simply be in the moment and engage, connect, and explore. So, 50% of what I'm doing, to answer the question directly, Andy, is, getting around to spend time with those frontline childhood professionals in person and offering professional development in form of social emotional learning. And it usually shows up in the form of playfulness. We have to engage it in order to know it, in order to recreate it for the children.
So I know that the basic idea was when you guys were starting this was that the discovery of children that have gone through trauma sort of lose that playfulness, almost become adult-like in a sense because they sort of have to, because life has kind of kicked them in the ass and they need to get back to being children. Is that on par for what your thoughts were?
You're absolutely correct. I'm jumping right into the everyday action of it because I know you spoke to directly on
Yeah,
well, what does the everyday look like?
right.
But that's the whole rhyme and reason and why we're doing it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I was a trauma counselor for years before joining forces with Steve Gross, who's the chief playmaker of
Mm-hmm.
Playmaker Project. He is the founder, and I worked with him in a whole nother capacity at the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation. As a matter of fact, we were the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation
Right.
in Boston. We served all of the metro area of Boston, and we responded to homicides and suicides and any type of acute traumatic event where children were involved.
Mm-hmm.
And when we showed up, man, it was heart wrenching sometimes because, I started to know a lot of those children in those communities and those families. We want to help them get back to normalcy in the everyday, life, regardless of the incident. And sometimes it was a family decedent. Sometimes it was vicarious trauma of the community. And, we were there to create space where children were afforded the opportunity to engage in playfulness once again,
Absolutely.
because, yeah, that's what they need in order to overcome all of life's adversity. And we know it to be true, but sometimes we forget how to actually initiate it once again, because, adults are also children of older ages.
Right. For sure.
And we start engaging in too much thinking, perhaps, and maybe we're working situations and we're telling everybody else that play is important, but maybe we're not engaging it.
Yeah. Well, us as adults, we sort of forget about that too, and we shouldn't. But some of us like to have fun and play. It's good for the soul, for sure, if nothing else. And let's talk a little bit about
Yes,
you. Let's start at the beginning. You were born and brought up here in Massachusetts, correct?
that's right. Roxbury, to be specific.
Mm-hmm.
Roxbury, Massachusetts. Not too far, ironically, from the Life is Good, headquarters in
Yeah,
Boston, too.
that's true. What got you into this project? What led to that?
Mm,
Did you go to
mm, mm.
school for
You
for
know,
trauma?
well, I'll give you the short answer first, and then I'll back up a little bit,
Okay.
because it's a process, man. And sometimes I look back and, it's interesting how I got here and why I'm so adamant about this mission. It was a divine call for me, honestly. And,
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid, man, from Roxbury. I lived in a housing project called Orchard Park. It was a housing development, but, it was the projects. And when I say the projects, it was a real project.
Mm.
There's layers to that as well, as why I'm calling it a project. And it was a project that we didn't design. It was a project almost like an institution even.
Mm.
Because when I look back in hindsight, I realized that there were a lot of families that were trapped in this dynamic. It's almost like a whole paradigm there in this housing project. And there's many housing projects around the country, but this one specifically, man, a lot of trauma as children, just shouldn't be exposed to, man.
Yeah.
A lot of things happen in there, man, that most children that are exposed to situations like this have a real hard time with being a true productive member in this society.
Were you taking notice of this as a child? Obviously, you knew that the trauma was there, but did you sort of take a personal notice about, hey, I would love to fix this? How young were you when you sort of determined that I'm going to do something about this?
Mm. Andy, that's a good question. because I guess, and I'm no pedestal on this, but I'm more of the interesting ones in this housing project, you know. And I got to tell you, man, this project is had super dynamics because everyone had kind of like a, you know, a little chip on their shoulder, but you know, because there was super groups that were born from this housing project
Hmm.
back in the 80s when I was really like growing up.
Hmm.
And like New Edition, Bobby Brown, and these guys are from my project.
Hmm.
And there were other people in the project that always had like talent and always wanted to showcase who they were and how powerful they were, regardless of the circumstances and all of these things that are happening around us. Because you know, I don't really have to get into the politics and the dynamics of what was happening in the 80s. We know Ronald Reagan was the president.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it had ups and it had downs. And where we were, it was really, really down. Somehow, everyone there, you know, had something else about them, you know, some kind of spark.
Hmm.
Then with all the, you know, the drugs and you know, violence started coming into community and hardcore play and that, you know, in that kind of way. Then it got dramatic, drastic, and traumatic for everyone.
Hmm.
And you know, my mom was an interesting person because she was from that same housing project, but she moved away when we were young. And we moved down south to Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, a nice little shuffleboard town. I did elementary school in St. Petersburg. I was advanced coming back to Boston by the time it was middle school time.
Hmm.
And that's around 1985, you know, around that time. I was always looking at what was happening in that particular project different than others
Hmm.
because I had that time in St. Petersburg
Right.
where you know it was like getting away. Yeah, sure, we come back and forth every summer and we spend the time in the project, so we knew the culture. You know, we were still part of that culture, but we were stepping away and learning things at a different speed.
Hmm.
And I was able to come back and look at what was happening there in a different way. You know that song last night, a DJ saved my life.
Sure.
Yeah, man. It was a song, and I couldn't tell you exactly right now what was the song, but I know it was a hip hop related song.
Mm-hmm.
And a hip hop related song saved my life, man,
Hmm.
because it turned me into the same fabric that was there in that project. You know, I was one of the ones who had some talent, and I had a little chip on my shoulder because I was able to move around a little more,
Hmm.
and I saw things a little different. So, you know, I formed a little group, you know, in that project, and we performed a lot, and we told stories
Hmm.
about what was going on, and just like all the hip hop songs that you hear today, but it was for that time,
Yeah.
and that helped me. It helped me escape a lot of the, you know, tragedies, man, that were taking place personally. But I was exposed to it all, even in, you know, within my household, you know, not exempt. Like things were happening that we just shouldn't have been exposed to.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate enough to have an escape. And with that escape, I was able to tell stories. There was nothing else for me to tell stories about but what was going on around. So as I reflected and I started looking back at those stories that I started to tell, you know, it started making more and more sense to me that, wow, I could actually change the outcome of these stories,
Mm-hmm.
make it into something else. So that's what started for me.
From there, did you end up going to school for psychology?
Yeah, many years later, Andy, you know, I was fortunate enough, you know, fresh out of high school to land a job. So I didn't go straight to school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I worked at a performing arts theater in Dorchester,
Hmm.
a place called Strand Theater. I don't know if you're familiar with the
Sure.
Strand.
Sure.
And I worked there, man, for like 7 years.
Wow.
By the time I left there, I was the technical director.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was really into it.
That's great.
And I met a lot of people. You know, I performed there a lot. You know, we did a lot there. It was amazing. At Toombs, yeah, this kid from from Orchard Park Projects, man. You know, I rap. You know, I'm kind of famous around the neighborhoods.
I bet you are. Yeah.
And there at the Strand Theater, you know, I met a lot of people, man. But I also learned how to produce.
Hmm.
And I also created a culture of helping people. Helping people do what? Yeah, produce their art
Mm-hmm.
and showcase themselves to multitudes of people. Man, that place sat 1,400 people.
That's
And
great.
I
Yeah.
mastered sound and I mastered the lights and I mastered stage, and I had every aspect because I'm also a fan. So I went to shows at the Strand, but I also performed at the Strand. And then I worked, behind the scenes at the Strand. All of those nutcrackers and such, man. I was the guy
Sure.
making it snow backstage. Yeah. I grew the tree and did all of that stuff. And I also worked, great shows there, like Public Enemy
Hmm.
and Wu-Tang Clan.
Wow.
And I performed in a lot of shows there.
Hmm.
And we were connected to radio stations and such, man, and I had a great time during that era.
Sure.
And it helped me escape again
Yeah.
a lot of tragedies because I worked at the Strand Theater. So friends would come to the shows and see the shows and they go back into the community and it was just all of this energy
Mm-hmm.
just was, foul, to
Yep.
say the least. And by the time I was done with my work at the Strand Theater, it'd be like 2 a.m. Just close up the place, shows are done.
Sure.
And by the time I show up back in the community, all the drama was done. It's like,
Mm.
wow, you know what happened to so and so?
Mm.
Like, wow, that's impossible. But I was super, super close to a
Yeah.
lot of closer than some of the things that I even offer to share. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
but I was able to escape it because I had that other outlet.
Right.
And then, there were people in community that started to understand. And sure, I had to have certain incidents where I was involved in fights and this, that, the third, because I was from that particular project. And I represented as a young rapper and such and everything. It's just, hard.
Yeah.
But it also made me, part of who I am today.
Of course.
And I understand the children that grow up in that type of paradigm as well. And I help to create situations where we would navigate those stories and share them outward, maybe have a different perspective.
Sure.
So it started way back then.
Yep.
Yeah, I know you talked about education.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so what happened there is after being that kind of person in community, just being about the culture and such, it was one day it was just, I woke up and I talked about the divine, and the divine told me, Andy, to go and help more people.
Yeah.
Go and help people. Yeah, that was the thing that I had to do. So I took a long walk that day and I had a vehicle and everything, man, but something told me that, and it wasn't something, it was the divine. I know now. And I took this walk, and a friend of mine told me about an organization in Roxbury that he worked for. He had went to school and everything. He had worked for this organization called Roxbury Youth Works, and it could help children and community. And it was great. He was a mentor. He was a counselor, that kind of thing. And I said, wow, I should be doing something like that. And he said, you should go down there. I think they're hiring.
Hmm.
And I walked down to this place, Andy, and this was those days, man, when you could walk into a place and fill out an application.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I did that day, and they
Huh.
interviewed me on that day.
Wow.
And I was raw, and I was fresh off the streets and everything. And they pulled me in for an interview that day. There was three people there. They asked me, "Hey, why do you think we should give you this job? Like, there's so many people that came in here and they qualified, they got degrees and such, and come in here and you fill out this application, the audacity. Like, what makes you think we should hire you over all of those other candidates that apparently seem to be qualified?" And
Hmm.
I said, well, if you don't hire me, then you're going to hear about me doing a lot of good in another organization in the same community because God told me to be here. And I said that in the interview.
Hmm.
And I didn't say another word, and I was hired in a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
to shorten the story up, man, I worked at Roxbury Youth Works for a while. I was so crazy and passionate about the work that I was doing, man. I was going to court with kids, and I was in community. I was doing so much good. And I wasn't there trying to do good. I was there because it was the divine call to help people. So I was doing that work, man. And there was this guy, Steve Gross, who worked at the trauma center and came to Roxbury Youth Works to do this presentation. And I didn't know who he was then. And that's the first day I met him. And he came to present. He was a white guy presenting to an all-black organization, and he was trying to all those folks. And he was sharing information about trauma and how it was how it impacted the urban community. And he was so on point with the things that he was sharing
Hmm.
that I knew I needed to connect with him. So I did. And he asked me the question right there, Andy. He was like, "What kind of education do you have?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, I'm from the School of Hard Knocks. I had
Mm.
none of that stuff you talking about."
Yeah.
And he said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, well, connect with me when you get some." Basically, he said some other things, and it was cool, but I'm shortening the story again.
Sure. Sure.
But he told me about a great program at Cambridge College back then, and it was a combined bachelor's, master's program. It was amazing. It was counseling psychology, and it took me a while because I went to UMass and took a psychology course or something. I was really into about helping people. I was trying to figure it out. I'm in my 20s, man, and I finally go check out that program this guy Steve Gross was talking about. And I got in the program over at Cambridge College, and it fast forwarded everything. Counseling psychology. Wow, this is interesting to me.
Hmm.
So I learned quickly, and I was knocking out everything, man. I was in the master's program before I knew it. Like, it was like 2 years later, and I was in the master's program.
Wow.
It's amazing. And I circled back with this guy, Steve Gross, man. And he's like, "Yeah, how's the education stuff going?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in the master's program." And he was like, "What?" And he couldn't believe it.
You move
So
fast.
yeah, we ended up connecting, man. I ended up working with him at the trauma center, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I got the job there as the outreach coordinator
Hmm.
at the Children's Trouble Recovery Foundation. And it was Robert Macy and people like Dr. Bessel Vanderkoop working there at the trauma center
Hmm.
and Margaret Blomsey. Man, these guys are the top of the line, man. The trauma professionals, the gurus. And I had no idea. I was in there working with them. And I'm just there trying to do a good thing, Andy. I'm at school, right? And I'm in my professional seminar development class. And the instructor comes along and is passing out these papers. And it's like, yeah, this conference coming up, yeah, everyone should know about this. Everyone should know who these presenters are. And I looked at the paper and I'm like, I'm working with these guys.
Hmm.
It was all of them.
Wow.
I got back to the trauma center, man, and I started looking around and I'm asking everybody, I'm like, why don't you guys tell me you all were the big deal?
You climbed into the mountain pretty quickly.
I did, man, and I made it known that I was there to really do the thing that needed to be done.
Right.
And before I knew it, I was working with all the top people in the trauma field, and I had no idea.
Hmm.
So I got the job before I even needed the degree,
That's amazing. That
and I
is
was
truly
yeah,
amazing.
yeah I've been on a mission ever since.
Yeah. I know at that time the trauma center was working one-on-one, right, with kids?
I
No?
mean, the trauma center in general, yes, was
Yeah.
working, inpatient and outpatient clinic.
Right.
However, we were a special unit
Mm-hmm.
as the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation, headed by Robert Macy. Dr. Macy he's an incredible pioneer in trauma response. I was fortunate enough to meet and learn exactly what that meant and the true understanding of what psychological first aid is, Andy. Because
Hmm.
those terms get so big, and sometimes people want to help, but they get connected with folks who keep using the terms and don't make it layman so that we understand exactly what it is that we're supposed to do to
Right.
be the most helpful, be the most helpful.
Sure.
And that psychological first aid really means to be present, man.
Yeah.
Because you can't spread what you don't have.
Right.
I learned that years ago about the trauma work. And they're like, wow, if you really want to be helpful, you have to be someone who has received help and understand how important it is to not overwhelm someone with all that you know. No one cares about how much you know
Right.
until they know how much you care, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's really about
Hmm.
being present first.
Okay.
And if you can be present, and you can have compassion, which the true meaning and understanding of compassion is to suffer with. And sometimes we don't understand that nothing's really wrong with anyone, but something happened to everyone. And when we can slow down and sit with the person and begin to understand what's really happening in their world, then we can start to develop the relationship. And then once we have a relationship, we can start to process with them and think and make plans. And then that's helpful. But when we want to offer too much too fast right away, man, it just clouds the idea of even thinking about what I really want. I remember growing up, Andy, from that same timeline, I was speaking of earlier when I was a kid, and this paradigm that was thrusted upon any given housing development in the urban community, and I just happen to be from the one here in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And all of the things that they kept trying to pile on my shoulder, and I mean, everyone who thought that they were being helpful so that we could escape. But no, the pile on was keeping me more in the paradigm
Hmm.
instead of releasing me and allowing me to think for myself and
Right.
use my strength and empower me to do the things that I love so much.
Hmm.
How are we ever going to break through the paradigm
Yeah.
if you don't, you know,
Yep.
think a little different? If you keep processing and thinking the same way that everyone else is thinking that's locked and trapped inside the paradigm, then yeah, you might just keep digging deeper.
Hmm. No question. So where did that lead from there? For how long were you with the trauma center?
Maybe about the early 2000s.
Okay.
I guess that was a time when I really started connecting with the idea to step outside the paradigm.
Right.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of stepped outside the paradigm and started working outside of the community at the trauma center the early 2000s.
Okay.
All of my work helped the urban community. So I was kind of from the outside doing the processing and thinking with my community. Now in hindsight, I look back and I give credit to my mom for this, regardless of circumstances.
Hmm.
But she took us away from the dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were other circumstances that brought us back to the same paradigm. But at the same time, she did do the thing that she thought was the right thing to do, and that to take us away so that we had the ability to go away
Yeah.
and think a little different. So all along, I guess I had that understanding that yeah, there's power in being able to do that. I count it all joy today. I'm very fortunate to have been able to step away from the
Mm-hmm.
paradigm. And then all of our work was focused on helping the urban community because that's where all the the trauma response was needed
Yeah.
inadvertently. So I'd show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd show up. I'd show up. That kind of became my motto.
Hmm. You
Yeah,
show
I'm
up.
gonna show up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't be there if you're not there.
that's right.
So eventually, I know Steve merged with the guys at Life is Good, which I know were high school friends of his,
Hmm.
and made a partnership there. And I
Hmm.
assume you initially went right with him, or no?
No, as a matter of fact, they did not.
Okay.
And I love Steve Gross. He's a good friend and colleague that I value to the end because we've been on a mission together, and it's amazing that we get to do these things together. And when I was working at the trauma center, I had no idea that Steve Gross himself, as a social worker, always had the emphasis on play, but he had no idea how powerful it actually was until some other guys, I'm not privy to when it took place for him, but it took place.
Mm.
And he was told, wow, what you doing? Going in to play with children. That's amazing. Do
Hmm.
you know what you're really doing? And he said, no. You know,
Hmm.
and I just know the story now. And he's like, well, they told him. So he took it serious and he kept playing, playing and playing. And when I was at the trauma center, and I started doing most of the outreach because, I had the connection to the community and I learned how to mobilize the team. One day I was at the office, after some busyness, And I go into the next room, and Steve Gross is hosting a small, intimate gathering with a couple of friends, that understood what he was holding in his back pocket. And in the back pocket was Project Joy.
Mm-hmm.
Project Joy was playgroup for children.
Mm-hmm.
You go into preschools and head starts and camps and anywhere with children are to offer therapeutic play, because that's what it was. And it was super intentional. These play groups. And I had no idea at first, but I interrupted a meeting, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can come right in, man." And I came in, and I learned what they were doing, and I was like, "Steve, this is what you're doing?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I said, "Sign me up. This is great." Oh man, I'm doing all of this intervention work. And I said, "What you guys are doing is total prevention.
Right.
This is powerful. Let me in."
Hmm.
I didn't want to work for Project Joy or anything. He couldn't pay people.
Right.
He was doing it. And I started doing play groups with another colleague of ours that worked with us as, intimate, we did those play groups, and they were phenomenal, Andy.
Hmm.
Yeah. Go in, we give teachers a break. We go in and play with the kids. They'd have a great time. Oh my goodness. It was creating everything that we wanted. More joy, more social connection, more safety and empowerment for everyone, more active engagement. The kids were loving it.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness. They were so playful. That's what we want, right?
You bet.
Hmm. Yeah, well, one day, Andy, we ended a play group and the kid was very excited. And a teacher came back from break, and teacher didn't have a great break. And we knew the teacher was a good teacher and the program was a quality program. This teacher, I don't know what happened during the break, it's irrelevant, but she did not want to hear how good the play group was from that particular child who wanted to tell her, Miss So and so, it was a great playing group, and Miss So and so handled the child in front of us, scoring the child, redirected the child quickly in front of everyone, as a matter of fact. And we were mandated reporters, but we didn't report her. We went back to our trauma center lab and we talked about it. And we came up with a plan, Andy, to help that teacher. And for that matter, all teachers, because we realized then what we did was wrong. We wasn't including the teacher in the
Mm-hmm.
actual play experience.
Smart.
Yes. So we took the teacher and 8 other teachers away for a weekend retreat for the very first time. And we played with teachers the entire weekend. And we just shared the theory because we were trauma informed at this point. And the idea was to get back to your normal baseline. And what do children need? They need to play. But you can't spread what you don't have. And that's a kind of a core thread for
Mm-hmm.
the Playmaker Project to date. We must remember, in order to create these safe, loving, joyful, engaging environments where children can reach their greatest potential and thrive, man, we must possess those traits. Or, we might be spreading something else.
Absolutely. That's wise. And then what happened? Project Joy got a little bigger.
Yeah, we played around. We played
Yeah.
around a lot.
Right.
Yeah, we played around and we kept playing, man. And again, you mentioned that Steve, he knew the Jacob brothers, and it's not because he knew the Jacob brothers. They shared a similar philosophy. Of course, they talked about it for years, and life is good. It's very generous. They had their own kids foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave money to other folks that were doing great work with kids. And one year, they partnered with Steve as Project Joy and said, "Hey, let's do a fundraiser for Project Joy." And it was awesome. We raised some money. We had a great event, and it was awesome. And it's like, wow, this is great. Wow, we're doing a lot of the same thing. We're spreading the power of optimism. These guys are using the vehicle T-shirts, and we are partnering with frontline childhood professionals at this point. Spreading the power of optimism. We should join forces. It took a few years, but we went in and really convinced these guys, man. They came out to a training retreat with a group of teachers, and I say they, talking about the partners at Life is Good as individuals, and they
Mm-hmm.
attended this particular retreat that we were offering at the time for frontline childhood professionals, and it was amazing. for them as well. So they understood what we were really up to. And fast forward, and again, Andy, we became the Kids Foundation for Life is Good. So to date, Project Joy has evolved into what is now known as, the Life is Good Playmaker Project, or just the Playmaker Project. But we are the organization within Life is Good now that assumes the Kids Foundation, where we were once autonomous. So we partnered, became one outfit now, and Life is Good again has been very generous, allowing us to assume the position of their Kids Foundation. So we are the resource. When you see that tag that says 10% goes to kids in need, yeah, that's the Kids Foundation.
That's right.
And we are activating the resource by partnering with frontline childhood professionals and helping them to engage in the most critical thing that they could possibly adapt to their repertoire. And that's the understanding of the power of playfulness and optimism.
That's a huge step to be able to deal with a group of kids through a teacher, to try to teach that teacher or that after school program leader how to do it themselves so that they can
Mm,
affect even more kids.
that's right. And now, we have great momentum after all of these years, a couple of decades now. And we've been reinforcing and doubling down on early childhood specifically. So we're focused with 80% of our resources with early childhood,
That's great.
and offering professional development in form of training, ongoing resources and support, in form of coaching, in form of anything that they might need to engage a community that supports creating safe, loving, joyful, engaging environments and experiences where children are afforded the opportunity to be free and joyful so that they can engage, connect, and explore the surrounding world. That's playfulness right there. And
It's beautiful. And what is it that you do with the kids physically? What are you doing with play? Are you playing with balls? Are you playing with parachutes? How do you get them to engage? What are the games and types of things that you do?
it's interesting that you ask. Depends on what we need, you know. So when you think about what kids really need, man, you know, let me ask you the question here, and then we can get to it a little faster, I guess. You think about children, right? Right. You have any children, Andy?
I do. I got a 13-year-old.
Awesome. So if you could offer your 13-year-old or any child for that matter, what you believe in your heart is the most important trait you can nurture in them so that they can overcome all adversity, and live a good life.
Mm.
What would it be?
Probably self-confidence,
Okay.
but also
Self-confidence.
generosity,
All right. That's awesome.
humbleness. Yeah.
All of it. All of that is great.
Yeah.
And humility. Yeah, there's so
Humility.
many things that you could think of that would be the superpower trait that a child could possess.
Mm.
And at Life is Good in the Playmaker Project, we've identified 10 of them. They show up in forms of love and gratitude and simplicity and humor and fun, and authenticity.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a couple of more. I know I didn't name them all, but you understand where I'm going with this
I
because
do.
you've named self-confidence and you can see how that can fit under the same umbrella.
Absolutely.
Now, if we want to make sure that we're nurturing those particular traits in children, we choose games and activities, and what we call goodifying is the idea. So you take any game and you goodify it to make sure that it's intentional and specific about helping to nurture that superpower trait within that group or the individual. So games and activities, man, they're worthless. Quite frank,
On their own.
you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Yeah,
Sure.
it's just whatever. I mean, you can do it. It's not about the what. It's about the how
Yeah.
and the way and the why you're doing everything, man.
Mm.
Eight Mouth Brown had a great quote. The blues guitar player, man.
Mm.
He said, "Yeah, the music is not in the guitar. Where's the music? Yeah, it's inside of you.
Mm.
all of those games and activities are just like the instrument.
Yeah.
Just sit in the corner, collect dust,
Hmm.
until you come and pick it up and strum it with your beautiful music. All of the things that you have inside to bring it to life. Man, you're a playful person.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to play cards, if you're playing it real stale and you keep coming up with all the different rules that nobody's familiar with, you're going to destroy it. It's
Mm.
not going to be fun.
Right.
But if you're playing it with true openness, that's another great superpower.
Hmm.
You're playing it with humor and fun and gratitude and all of the great stuff that is going to help nurture a relationship. And you're adamant about doing that through the actual experience. That's when you're bringing gold to the activity.
Hmm.
So playing with any activity, basically, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if you're a true playful person with the playmaker approach, you know what I'm talking about. I keep reiterating again, man, I started with that. I'm a playmaker, man. You know what I'm saying? Andy,
That's,
playmakers
yeah.
show up.
Yeah.
You make good things happen in the game. Remember, I'm a producer.
Yeah.
So even then, yeah, you show up and you don't know what you're going to get, but it doesn't matter. Oh,
Right.
what do the people need? Oh, let's do that. You supported at all of, those Life is Good festivals, man. You didn't know what those things were really going to be. But I remember you, Andy. I remember you showing up with that great hat. You still wear that
I do
hat?
occasionally, but yeah. That was to stick out so that people could
Awesomeness.
find me if they needed to. As I was leading
Awesomeness.
all the games at Jaketown, if people needed me, they had a way to find me, and that's why I wore that silly hat. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You
Yeah.
didn't know what it was going to be. You sort of tried to make it whatever you felt it was for you that day, and look around and see what other people want to make of it that day, and you make it, and you make the kids as happy as can be, and you make the adults as happy as can be. And yeah, absolutely, that was those are great times doing those
And
festivals for sure.
thank you, Andy. I'm glad you said that, and you had a chance to just revisit that real quick too, and
Yeah,
say those things, man,
yeah,
because you just reminded me of another great superpower trait, and it's the trait of authenticity.
yeah.
You said, yeah, you got to be who you are too, because if you try to fake it, man, kids are baloney detectors,
That's a
you
great
know?
line. Kids are baloney detectors. Terrific.
They sm they
Yeah.
smell you, man,
Oh, that's
and they
true.
know when they
Yeah.
know when you're putting it on. They
Right.
know,
Right.
and it doesn't smell good to them. They stay away. They stay
Rotten
away from it.
baloney.
And you think they're listening to
Yeah.
you, but they're not.
Hmm.
They're paying attention, though.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
It's true.
They're
That's true.
always paying attention. But what you might be giving them
Yeah.
could be impacting them on a very different level. And it's like, wow, you can't spread what you don't have. And on the flip side of that coin, you can spread what you do have.
Mm.
And when you're totally aware of your disposition, then it's about the intention. Hmm, what do I intend to do with the energy here? And if the child seems to already be, showing up with what you might identify as behaviors, and then you might go as far to say that those behaviors are issues, then maybe the adult has to consider, is this issue really a problem, or is it a problem for me? Hmm. And what am I going to do now with all of the great wisdom that I am as the adult?
Mm.
The greatest wisdom shows up in the form of kindness, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
And if we slow down a little bit with our wisdom, and take a deep breath in a moment, and we might realize that it's not so serious. We get back to actually engaging, connecting, and exploring, which is the playfulness that children know so much. We might just learn something.
It's a great ride. You're so wise beyond your years.
Thank you, man.
Obviously.
But I'm 50 now.
Lotsofmaps.com. Vintage, local, national, and world maps for an affordable price. 99% of our maps are $25 or less. Great as gifts. Frame them or put them under glass for your home, vacation home, or as a memory of a special place. Lotsofmaps.com.
I want to talk about you for a second. We've been talking about what you do, and we're talking about the kids that you're affecting. I'm going to ask the stupidest question that could be asked at this point.
Never.
Do you like your job?
Man, listen, I'll tell you like this, Andy. I don't have a job.
Even better.
Are you kidding me? I don't have a job. I'm on a mission. And this mission ain't no small time thing.
Yeah.
Now that I realize, the totality of everything that I've been able to experience to this point. When I spoke about wisdom, right? And how you get wisdom, and I think now I understand because I'm 50, but I didn't understand 20 years ago even how you actually get to wisdom. I think about it and I ask, like, how do you become wise? And you have to have the experiences, you know? A friend of mine shared this with me before and said, hey, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Well, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
So brilliant.
Like,
Absolutely brilliant. Love that.
That's great. That's great. Oh, wow. You have to actually live a little. And you apply knowledge over time, and then it produces wisdom. And I realized over time that I actually called for the experience. When I shared with you how I got into working with Project Joy, even, which is now known as the Playmaker Project.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, wow. I decided to support Project Joy and do the work as a volunteer.
Right.
And then, I kind of skipped this part. What happened was Steve stepped down as the director of the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation to explore Project Joy full time
Right.
because his friends advised him, and his friends were successful businessmen at this point, that in order to be truly successful, you got to double down on what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, wow, that's interesting. So Steve, I couldn't believe it. At this point, I was the assistant director at the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation, and Steve Gross, the director, I thought was on this ride with me,
Mm-hmm.
came and shared with me that he was stepping down and asked, yeah, are you interested? He spoke with Robert Macy, who founded the organization. Would it be okay if I stepped into the director's role at this point? Because I learned everything and I was doing all the work, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I didn't, like I said, I was working at the trauma center. I didn't realize I was so bossed up. I was just doing it. I wasn't trying to be the boss, but before I knew it, Steve Gross was stepping down and I was invited into the director's seat at the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation.
Wow.
To me, that was a big deal, Andy.
Absolutely.
Huh. So I was like, wow, that's great. And I was like, cool, congratulations, Steve. Yes, I accept. So I was the director there, but I was
Wow.
still volunteering at Project Joy with
Yeah.
Steve. And then at some point, he offered me a situation. I was telling him how exhausted I was
Mm.
with working the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation. I had great teams that I was able to mobilize and everything, man, to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
But it was exhausting, man. We were showing up at funerals. We were showing up in community. It got too close to home. I knew too much about the people and what was happening then. And I was the guy who was there to show up and help them in the moment and thereafter, as long as it took, because I was totally committed, right?
Yeah, I bet.
And before you know it, we were offering trainings to all first responders like police, EMS, fire, even clergy. And I gained a reputation at the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation as the guy that showed up to help folks with their trauma. Oh, it was so hard.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Steve was having success because we were helping. We were all doing it together. It was like,
Sure.
oh, we were totally trauma informed, but we were offering play groups. But it
Mm.
was better, man, when we showed up as, I was Ant from the, Project Joy. Oh,
Mm.
wow. People were like, wow, it's Ant from Project Joy. It's Ant, Steve from Project Joy. And we had another guy, Jesse. We were like the Joy Boys, Andy.
Yeah.
And we were having a great time with teachers. And, at that point, we were younger, so we were actually engaging children much more.
Yeah.
And he offered me a position finally. As we were shutting down, we decided to shut down the Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation
Hmm.
because it was expensive. And at that point, we had trained everybody in the city, all the first responders.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert was actually spearheading a whole nother program for profit and traveling the world doing big time engagements and such. He's a big deal, Dr. Robert Mason. Very powerful understanding of trauma response. And we shut down that Children's Trauma Recovery Foundation after training everyone in the city that we possibly could.
Hmm.
And I went full time with Project Joy.
Yeah.
So that's it.
That's it.
It's kind of the same game. We just changed the name.
Yeah, that's for sure. So we won't call it a job, but
Right.
obviously you love what you do.
I do, man.
Yeah. And it must make you
I love the
feel,
work. That's right.
I'm not going to single out certain jobs, but if you're doing something that makes you a lot of money or makes your boss a lot of money or your shareholders a lot of money, you can go home and say, okay, I did a good job today and everyone above me is feeling good. But what have you really done, I guess is the question. And you're really doing it. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no, portfolio you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about the stockholders and things like that. You're dealing directly with the teachers, the kids, and really making a difference. I imagine that there are probably some tough days, but it sounds to me like there's probably more happy ones, joyful ones than that. Is that true?
Well, the short answer is yes, Andy. I am fortunate enough to be able to redirect my focus, and I count it all joy.
Yeah.
Count it all joy.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how deep it goes
Right.
in the idea that it is wrong. Because now, at this point, there is no right or wrong, man. I'm 50, Andy. It's like, oh wow, all of the stuff that happened is what it is. It already happened.
Yeah.
So, you can't explain it. Beforehand, you would think the impossible cannot happen. And then the impossible happens. There's some impossible things that have had happened, for me and my family and things that, wow, would take a lot of people out. But I have to count it all joy.
Yeah.
And it's simply because I've been privileged to have an understanding of psychology. And it's basically how the mind works.
Right.
And it's up to us. It's totally up to every individual as the sole controller. And that's why I understand the importance of a balanced mental health.
Hmm.
And that balance game is serious because everyone, you can say, oh, yeah, there's mental health issues. There's mental health issues. Well, everyone has mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
But what you choose to pay attention to grows. And if you pay attention to everything that's going on around you, then that's what it's gonna feel like. You're
Yep.
gonna feel like you're just going around and around and around and around. And that's the understanding of what paradigm is.
Right.
It's totally what you are focused on. And if you thrust it and perpetuate it, and others around you are telling you to look this way, then yeah, you may get trapped in a paradigm.
And I gotta ask a little bit about folks if they're interested in getting involved in something similar to what you're doing, if not the playmakers themselves. What kind of advice would you give folks that might have a similar love of optimism and joy and playfulness?
Come to Playmaker University.
Yeah,
Yes, come
right.
on. Come to Playmaker University. Andy, over years, we've been galvanizing and collating information and strategy and, just this understanding of how to really become trauma informed so that you can create those safe, loving, and joyful, engaging environments
Mm-hmm.
for children, not just young children, children of all ages,
Right.
us too. And now we have an online component, Andy,
Mm,
called Playmaker University. It's amazing. You should take it.
I
It's
should.
great. Yeah, we have scholarships and everything, man. You'll never believe it.
Well, so how do folks find Playmaker University and see if they're eligible to come and be part of it?
Sure, they can look us up simply, so many different ways, man. They can go straight to Life is Good if they like, lifeisgood.com and check out the Playmaker Project. See what we're up to. We are the Kids Foundation at the official Life is Good company. And we are also doing business as the Playmaker Project. So you can also simply look for the playmakerproject.org. There might be a separate .com. That's not us. We
Right.
are the playmakerproject.org.
Okay.
We're totally affiliated with Life is Good, once again. So not to be mistaken that we are a different entity. And there are ways to simply become a playmaker right on the website. And that would be the quickest, easiest, most effective way for someone to learn information about, what we've been up to and what we're up to now, and a glimpse into where we're going. Look for us on all channels. We're on LinkedIn, Playmaker Project.
That's great. Good info. Playmakerproject.org or lifeisgood.com. You can find out more information. So, Ant, you've done a lot of talking about other people and how they're effective, but I really want to kind of focus in on you for a second.
Mhm.
How has all of this good that you're doing affected you? I mean, I can't imagine it would be a negative way, but how are you doing with this?
Well, as you know, I'm a real optimist. So I always respond when someone asks a question. Man, how you doing? And my response is always good. But I'm not saying it's great,
Yeah.
Andy. It's good. You know, it's amazing today, how I am able to put this idea of what has happened into a proper perspective and move forward. Because honestly, this is what happened for me and my family, as someone who's been out in community creating this space to do good, man. I'm a father. I was a young father and probably shouldn't have had two children at the age of 20, but I did. Now, I mentioned that paradigm too that I was growing up in. So there was a paradigm there. And I was still young, trying to figure things out, man. I was gangster, street rapper. I had a persona. And it was a way about me and elements about me and my surroundings and people that I grew up with, man. And, some would say we were dangerous, but I would say we were surviving.
Hmm.
And it was just the way that things were. So having children at that age is clear to understand, it's just like a movie that you would watch where you grow up in the elements. So my children, yeah, they grew up knowing that their father was kind of street guy, did things a certain way.
Hmm.
But I wasn't with their mom, you know, but I was still out there doing great things in community, evolving, becoming somebody. And I had no idea that I was actually becoming somebody.
Hmm.
I was just the body doing what I felt like was, the thing to do.
Right.
Until I had that epiphany, I spoke of earlier. But before that, man, I'm just that guy. How I see it. I had a job, yeah, but I still was in the street, and my family's involved in things, and we're connected in ways that just involve street culture because that's who we were in this paradigm. So I had a son who was growing and changing and evolving along the way. and I'd see him and engage him in particular ways, and I'd speak to him as I was growing and evolving, learning concepts. But around his mom and particulars, they think I was insane because I spoke with vernacular that they weren't familiar with.
Hmm.
And they would say, even in my company, like, you talking to him like that, like he understands, you know,
Hmm.
which would cause him to not really hear some of the things that maybe his father was sharing with him that was very valuable. Over time, my son grew to be somebody else, somebody else that he thought I was instead of watching me for who I was. And maybe I instructed him along the way, Andy.
Hmm.
I told him like, yeah, you're gonna be better than me. Don't be like me. Be better than me. You got better than me, all right. Better in all the wrong things
Hmm.
instead of the evolved Ant Toombs that I was. And this is my junior, Anthony Toombs Jr. By the time he was 16, he told me, nah, Dad, yeah, you're corn now. You don't know what's going on in the streets. You act like you don't know what's going on. You hang out with the governor and the mayor and the clergy and stuff. And I said, yeah, Anthony, I do know what's going on in the streets. That's why I'm hanging out with the clergy. And I became a minister.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've been a minister for 10 years, Andy.
Wow. Who knew?
And yeah, right. My son was getting involved in all of these things, man, that just created this persona around him that I don't think he wanted to become, but he did. He did a lot of dirt. Things that just were wrong. And I kept warning him too along the way with a metaphor. Like, Anthony, watch out. Watch out there, man. Careful. And he was telling me, Dad, it's all right. It's all right. It's like, he was going out in the water a little bit. And I'm telling him, like, piranhas are out there in that water. And he goes out there, and nothing happens, man. And he's like, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. And then the day happened, Andy, in 2016. My son was shot and killed in Roxbury.
Hmm.
And it was behind something that he was involved in. And it just happened to come back to him years later when he was done with it. But that actually happened. And as a minister, I was there to eulogize my son's own funeral. And that wasn't intentional. It just happened. I was speaking about my son, and all of a sudden I didn't realize how deep it was going as I spoke about things that was coming to full fruition to me there in the moment. I looked in the eyes of all of the people that were there to support me and funeralizing my son. It was an impossible moment, Andy.
Hmm. I can't
But
imagine.
in that moment, I learned a lot. And sure, afterwards, man, I was devastated because I was strong through the process of getting through that, because I was a trauma counselor, I'm a minister, man, and here's the moment. This is what happens to most. I've been supporting everyone in the community
Hmm.
around these particular moments. And now it's my son, me and my family. And I had to show up and do all of the right things, Andy, and represent in all the right ways. And I was able to do it. But afterward, man, I had a real hard time.
Yeah.
Such a hard time. I had to step away from the Playmaker Project. So in 2017, I stepped down and I left indefinitely.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was gone. And I live in Los Angeles, so I was totally removed. And for 3 whole years, man, it was hard, Andy. And well, not even for the whole 3 years. I would say like for that first year was devastating. And I took time to do, what a lot of black men from Roxbury just won't do. I went to therapy.
Hmm.
And I was able to find a great therapist because I was intentional. When we first came to Los Angeles in 2010, I found a great doctor, primary care physician, was a black male, looked just like me. I sought him out, and he understood me, and he knew exactly what to recommend for me. And he recommended this particular therapist, which who was in house on his team, and the therapist was excellent. And it wasn't about what she said or anything; it was the work that she gave me, and it took time too, Andy. It
Yeah.
took 8 months of extreme therapy. The first 3 months, man, I wasn't getting it, even with all of my knowledge at the time. Just wasn't putting my knowledge into practice.
Mm.
Knowledge over time with practice produces wisdom. And over time, I started to practice what she was giving me, and it unlocked some things for me after I went even deeper. But I came out, and that's the great thing about going through something, Andy. When you're going through something, you actually come out if you choose to come out of it.
Mm.
You can't have a story, you can't have some kind of a testimony if you never have those type of tests. So that that's that's why I count it all joy today. So when you ask the question about, well, is it really good? Man, and people say that to me all the time, like, really, Aunt, life is good, huh? I'm like, yeah. If you knew what I knew, you would understand.
Yeah.
And it's not even about what I know. Like, I don't have to say that. Just say, yeah, life is good. And then maybe the follow-up is, helping folks to understand. I'm not suggesting that life is perfect and life is easy. However, breathing is good, you know,
That's for sure.
taking a walk is good, man. Eating food is good. And the last time I checked, man, I still get to go to the grocery store and buy things that I can put in my refrigerator. That's good. I've been to Haiti,
Yeah.
third world country. Yeah. Hmm. If folks are not going to that grocery store, man, you better know
Mm.
what to do.
Hmm.
Have some agriculture up in you. I can
Yep.
go to the gas station to get gas, man.
Yeah.
But in Haiti, folks are walking up to gas pumps, and guess what? They got to walk home with it.
Hmm.
You know what can happen to them on the way home
Mm.
with all the people that need gas?
Yeah, we take a lot for granted for sure. It's
Yes.
getting that perspective is really changes the mind for sure. And I know you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot.
Well, the full wraparound is this. And to date, man, I'm a grandfather. I have four grandsons.
Nice.
How blessed am I to be able to have four
That's
grandsons? And my
amazing.
son Anthony leaves behind a grandson
Hmm.
for me.
Right.
And he's almost a teenager. He's gonna be 13 in
Wow.
April.
Hmm.
That's amazing. Yeah.
It is.
And he asked me in a candid moment, yeah, well, can't you just be my papa? And I said, yeah, I
Yeah,
actually am.
there you go.
So how about that, Andy? How about that?
Well, and
Count it
so
all joy.
I know
Yeah.
I asked the question about, originally, do you like your job? But with you, it's really, do you like your life? Because you live it. You're living exactly what it is that you believe, and you don't have to put on a uniform and become a garbage man or a sea captain or an accountant or whatever. You are doing what you feel, and your life is truly. I'm not sure I know anyone else that does that. That doesn't need to change for a few hours in the day to make a few bucks, where you get to be you all day long and a joyful you. And that's cheers to you, man. Love it.
Well, it's about who you really are, because I honestly, Andy, I've done all of those things, man. All of those things you just spoke about, man. I've been a security guard. Man, my first job, I worked at Diaper Service, and I counted stinky diapers. I almost said it.
You could say it. It's a podcast.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I counted those diapers that people sent back in bags
Hmm.
full of feces
Yeesh.
and bugs and flies and all of it.
Yeah.
And I had gloves up to my arms, and I counted them so that they could recycle them.
Hmm.
Yeah, I worked there for $5 an hour.
Yeah.
It was my first job. And then I worked at grocery stores.
Yeah.
And I worked everywhere, man. I've done everything.
Well, and it's all experience, right? It all becomes who you are. You don't
Sure.
forget that stuff. If it was good or bad, you don't forget it. It still makes up for a piece of you.
That's right.
Good experience.
That's right. And when it was time to get back
yeah,
to doing the work with the Playmaker Project, by the way, because I was gone for 3 years.
yeah,
It wasn't about trying to just come back and get a job. No. Again, I've been on this mission for a long time. It was because I had a relationship with the folks at the Playmaker Project.
yeah,
And they're transitioning and doing other things. But, Steve Gross is a special person
Yep.
as well as the chief playmaker. So together, we kept checking in. And it's like, oh, yeah, wow. I could probably help in that area.
yeah.
And then I'd be invited in to do some consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did some consulting. And, we decided to create this platform. So I started showing up and engaging in a lot of those creative components because I'm a creative.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still playing. It just made sense over time. It's like, well, I can't keep doing all of this other stuff, putting on a uniform and trying to be creative at the same time. I should just get back FTE.
There you go.
That makes more sense. So we did that whole thing. And now I realize, it makes more sense for me to really show up and represent this organization because I'm truly on this mission. So that's how I've evolved to now be known as a founding member.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also responsible for the growth and expansion here because I'm on that type of mission. I'm really strategic about that, by the way.
Great. Ant Toombs, founding member, head of growth and expansion of the Playmaker Project, the Life is Good Playmaker Project. Playmaker University is what Ant is suggesting you get involved with, and I'm going to get involved with it too. Go to playmakerproject.org or lifeisgood.com, and you can find the Playmaker University and Playmaker Project things that they're doing. You can become optimists to do really just amazing work like Ant does. Ant, thank you so much for joining
Yes,
us.
sir. Yes, sir.
I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Andy.
it, and thank you for all you do and for being who you are.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate you giving me the time and the platform to, talk about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Join us again for another episode of Occupations right here.
Occupations has been brought to you by lotsofmaps.com. Please follow Occupations the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to find information about our next episode or to see what past episodes are available.